Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. In Maple Oaks, Michael Hansen was the go-to neighbor until the HOA president turned gratitude into control. A minor accident became a full-blown frame job, but Michael had something she didn't: airtight surveillance, a meticulous plan, and the patience to watch her bury herself. It's funny how fast your reputation can turn into a leash. For years, I was the reliable guy in Maple Oaks, the one who could troubleshoot the clubhouse Wi-Fi, set up a neighbor's printer without sighing too loudly, or get the community's security cameras back online after a summer storm. I'm Michael Hansen, 39 years old, an engineer in cybersecurity by trade, and for 5 years, I'd paid my HOA dues on time, attended every meeting that mattered, and generally tried to be the kind of neighbor people actually wave to. At first, it was mutual. People brought me pies and thanks, invited me to backyard barbecues, and the HOA president, Karen Fletcher, treated me like her go-to problem solver. I didn't mind. It felt good to help, and I could usually knock out her urgent requests in under an hour. But somewhere along the line, those favors stopped being neighborly and started feeling mandatory. Karen had a knack for dressing orders up as emergencies. "Michael, the audio system in the clubhouse has gone dead. Book club is in an hour." Or, "Michael, I need a ride to the city council meeting. My car's in the shop." She never asked if I had time. She assumed I'd drop whatever I was doing. At first, I rationalized it. What's an hour here or there? But I started to notice the pattern. Every time she benefited, it was urgent. Every time I said I had other plans, she got that tight-lipped smile, the kind you see right before someone reminds you they know something you'd rather they didn't. I didn't have skeletons in the closet, but I had a comfortable place in this neighborhood, and I knew enough about HOA politics to understand how quickly comfort can be revoked. The tipping point came on a Tuesday evening. I'd just sat down to dinner with my wife and kids when Karen called. No hello, no preamble, just, "The projector in the clubhouse is misaligned, and we need it for Friday's wine tasting night. Come fix it tomorrow." I told her politely that I was swamped with work deadlines and suggested she call a local AV company. Silence. Then, "You've forgotten who's always gone to bat for you, Michael." The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at my phone, my fork suspended in midair, wondering when doing free tech work had turned into a political debt. The first official letter from the HOA came 3 days later. Letterhead, formal language, the whole 9 yards. My trash bin had been placed at the curb 15 minutes earlier than allowed by community ordinance. I almost laughed until I remembered that our so-called ordinance was really just a polite guideline in the HOA handbook. I responded in writing, asking for the specific bylaw number. A week later, another letter arrived. The sheer curtain in my garage window was not consistent with the aesthetic of the neighborhood. That one I photographed, printed out, and filed alongside my trash bin notice. I could feel the paper cuts of bureaucracy starting to accumulate. It escalated from petty to absurd. An anonymous complaint accused me of blasting music past midnight. My home server logs, down to the decibel reading from the smart thermostat, showed nothing above normal household noise. Another letter accused me of unauthorized construction beside my garage. That construction was a metal shelving unit holding gardening tools, clearly visible to anyone with functioning eyes. Still, Karen managed to have it noted in my file at the HOA office. I stopped being reactive and started being thorough. I installed a new set of Power over Ethernet cameras, feeding a local NVR in my locked office. Each file was time-stamped, hashed with SHA-256, and mirrored to an encrypted cloud account. I synchronized the system clock with NTP servers so there'd be no argument about timing. I scanned every letter I received, logged call times, and kept emails in a folder labeled Karen's Greatest Hits. If she wanted to play games, I was going to keep score. And in the back of my mind, I had the uncomfortable certainty that this wasn't the kind of game you win by being nice. Saturday mornings are supposed to be quiet in Maple Oaks. That's when most of the neighborhood takes their coffee out on the porch, waves to dog walkers, and lets the kids ride their bikes without worrying about rush hour traffic. That particular Saturday, I'd barely finished my first mug when I stepped out to get something from the garage and froze. My car, a silver sedan I baby more than most people treat their firstborn, was sitting exactly where I'd left it the night before, nose in toward the garage. Only now, the rear bumper had a deep, ugly dent right in the middle. The paint was scraped to bare metal in one spot, and the lower panel was bent in like someone had kicked it with a steel-toed boot. Standing a few feet away, still in her own SUV, was Karen Fletcher. Her front right fender was crumpled, the headlights spiderwebbed with cracks and streaks of silver paint. My silver paint ran along the dent. She didn't look shocked. She looked irritated, as if I'd inconvenienced her. Before I could even get a word out, she rolled down her window and barked, "You backed out without looking and hit me." I blinked. What? My car hadn't moved in over 12 hours. I knew that because I'd parked it at 9:43 the night before, gone inside, and locked up. The cameras had it. The server logs had it. Hell, my wife had been sitting in the living room window that faced the driveway. She'd have noticed if I'd gone for a midnight joyride. Karen didn't give me time to answer. She was already on her phone, pacing a tight circle near her driver's door. "Yes, this is an accident," she was saying. "The other driver backed into me. He's still here. Yes, I'll wait for the officer." She shot me a look that could strip paint faster than a heat gun. A moment later, a woman I recognized as Linda Parker, Karen's favorite coffee companion, wandered over from the sidewalk. "I saw the whole thing," she announced loudly for no one in particular. "You pulled out too fast, Michael." I looked from Karen to Linda, back to the unmoved position of my car. It was the kind of word-against-word setup you read about on insurance scam blogs. I took out my phone and started photographing everything. The angle of both cars, the exact distance from my rear tires to the garage, the scrape pattern, even the light conditions. I crouched low to capture the transfer of paint on her fender and the lack of any skid or tire marks behind my car. If she wanted to play courtroom drama, I'd give her evidence she couldn't Photoshop her way out of. The police arrived after about 20 minutes. A marked cruiser with 2 officers who looked like they'd been through every kind of neighbor dispute imaginable. The younger one took Karen's statement first. I watched her gesture animatedly toward my garage, miming some kind of reckless backing maneuver. Linda hovered nearby, nodding like a metronome. When the officer came over to me, I kept it simple. My car hadn't moved since last night. I had video surveillance, and I was more than willing to share it when the time came. They walked around both vehicles, took measurements, and scribbled notes. One of them pointed out that my rear bumper damage was dead center with no scuffing to the sides, consistent with being hit while stationary. Karen, overhearing this, jumped in with, "Well, maybe he was at an angle when he backed out." The cop just kept writing. In the end, they said what I expected. They couldn't assign fault on the spot. They'd file a report, and it would be up to the insurance companies to sort it out. Karen looked almost pleased at that, probably thinking she had her witness and a head start with her insurer. As soon as the cruiser pulled away, Karen marched up to me. "You'll be hearing from my insurance. Do the right thing and admit you were wrong. It'll save us both time." I didn't bother replying. Instead, I went inside, pulled up the incident timestamp from my NVR, and exported the full clip, hashing it, duplicating it, and storing it on 3 different devices. I also fired off preservation letters by email to Karen, Linda, and the HOA board, instructing them to retain any camera footage from their properties and warning against altering the vehicles before a proper inspection. By noon, I'd already notified my own insurer, given them the police report number, and scheduled a visit from an independent appraiser. Karen could spin whatever story she wanted. I had the truth in high definition, backed up in triplicate. All I had to do was wait for her to dig herself in deeper. By Monday morning, the whispers had already started. Maple Oaks isn't a big community. News travels faster than the landscaping crew's golf carts. I logged into the neighborhood group chat over coffee and saw a thread titled "Recent Safety Concerns." The original post was a bland PSA about caution when backing out of driveways, but the replies were filled with little digs. Some people think, "Rules don't apply to them, and we all know who this is about. Nobody used my name, but they didn't need to." The HOA newsletter that hit inboxes the same morning made sure of it. One of our members was involved in a dangerous vehicle incident within our community. Let's remember to drive responsibly and keep our neighbors safe. I could almost hear Karen's voice in every line. I ignored the bait and stuck to my own plan. First step, secure the paper trail. I sent the HOA board an official request for copies of any minutes, drafts, or emails where my name, or any unnamed member involved in an accident, was discussed. Under Texas Property Code, Chapter 209, they had to give members access to certain records. I worded it like I was giving them an opportunity to comply, not a demand. Still, I imagine Karen's expression when she saw the email, the same face she made when a karaoke night got shut down for noise complaints. The reply came 2 days later from the board secretary CCing Karen. It was polite, but the attached files told their own story. Metadata doesn't lie. The accident notice in the newsletter had been written on Karen's personal laptop at 11:47 p.m., just hours after the police report was filed. No board vote, no collaborative edit, just her, acting as if she were Maple Oak's one-woman PR department. I printed the properties page, highlighted her machine's user ID, and slid it into my growing folder of Karen originals. That same week, I got a letter from Karen's insurance company. The tone was pure faux concern. In the interest of resolving this matter efficiently, we invite you to accept liability for the incident so repairs can be promptly completed. I called my own insurer before I even finished reading it, forwarding them the letter and reminding them the claim was disputed. Then I told them I'd be arranging an independent reconstruction specialist. My agent chuckled and said, "Looks like you're playing chess, not checkers." In the meantime, I started mapping out every possible vantage point of the accident site. Maple Oaks is full of Ring doorbells and Nest cams. All it took was a few friendly conversations and the occasional promise to blur out people's faces. 2 houses down, a neighbor's front camera covered part of the street where Karen would have approached my driveway. Across the way, another cam caught the top edge of my garage. I didn't ask for the footage yet. That would come later, timed for maximum effect, but I made sure everyone knew I might need it. Then came the committee coup attempt. Late Thursday, an agenda appeared for the next HOA meeting. Item 4. Vote to suspend Michael Hansen from the Beautification Committee pending resolution of safety concerns. It was dressed up in bureaucratic politeness, but the intent was obvious. Beautification was my one official role in this circus, and Karen wanted me out. That night, I took a slow walk around my property, checking each camera feed, making sure all were recording cleanly. The new garage soffit cam was running flawlessly, timestamps in sync with NTP servers, backed up both locally and in the cloud. I knew Karen thought she was turning the neighborhood against me. What she didn't know was that every move she made was just another piece in my evidence archive. All I had to do was keep letting her talk, write, and dig. The following week, Karen's patience, or what little she had, started to fray. I came home late Tuesday afternoon to find her SUV creeping past my driveway at a snail's pace. She wasn't just driving through, she was craning her neck toward my sedan like a jeweler inspecting a fake diamond. I stayed inside, watching from my office window while my cameras did the real work. The wide-angle lens tucked into the mailbox had a perfect view. Her vehicle rolled to a stop. She leaned forward over the steering wheel, and I could see her lips moving as she took out her phone to snap a series of photos. I'd installed that mailbox cam for product testing months ago, back when the HOA wanted to explore modern security solutions. Now it was my silent witness. The second hidden gem was mounted in the garage soffit, invisible unless you were the kind of person who routinely examined other people's roof lines. Both feeds recorded in crisp, high-definition time sync down to the second with redundant backups. Karen had no idea they existed, and I wasn't about to enlighten her until the right moment. 2 nights later, the footage caught something even stranger. Around 8 p.m., she came back on foot. The street was quiet, no cars passing, just the sound of her heels clicking on the asphalt. She walked straight up to the back of my sedan, glanced over her shoulder, and crouched down as if inspecting the bumper. My garage soffit cam had audio. It wasn't perfect, but it picked up her voice clearly enough. "If we can show it got worse," followed by something muffled. She stood, took another photo, then strolled away as if she'd just been out for a pleasant evening walk. By the next morning, I'd clipped the relevant sections, hashed them, and uploaded them to my evidence archive. Then I filed an addendum to the police report, noting possible tampering or intent to alter physical evidence, and provided still images along with a request to preserve her phone data for the relevant dates. I CC'd my insurer and hers. The phrasing was polite, factual, and absolutely loaded. While that was simmering, my independent accident reconstruction specialist came by for the inspection I'd scheduled earlier. He was a former insurance investigator, the kind of guy who could read dent patterns like a crime scene tech reads blood spatter. After measuring, photographing, and comparing both vehicles, he told me, off the record for now, that the damage to my bumper was entirely consistent with being hit while stationary. No yaw marks, no angled scrape, just a clean, straight push inward. If you were moving, he said, you'd see deformation to the corners and paint transfers along the curve. This is textbook stationary impact. I didn't rush to share that with anyone except my insurer. Let Karen keep thinking she had the upper hand. The longer she believed her version was airtight, the bolder she'd get. And bold people make mistakes. I'd seen it in corporate investigations 100 times. Overconfidence isn't just a flaw, it's a spotlight. So I carried on like nothing had changed. I waved when I saw her at the mail kiosk. I kept my property perfectly within HOA standards, just to deny her the easy shots. And at night, I reviewed the footage, checked the integrity of my backups, and waited. Because it was clear now, this wasn't just about a dented bumper anymore. She was circling, probing, trying to set up something bigger. And I was going to be ready when she finally made her move. The summons for the special HOA meeting landed in my inbox on a Thursday evening with all the subtlety of a brick through a window. The subject line read, URGENT safety concerns to be addressed. Inside, the message was dripping with Karen's brand of manufactured gravitas, formal language about community welfare, a request for full member attendance, and a final note that a representative from local law enforcement would be present to clarify liability issues. It was obvious what she was setting up. A public shaming in front of the neighborhood, with the added theater of a police officer's uniform for credibility. I showed up early the following Tuesday, partly to choose my seat, partly to watch the staging. The HOA clubhouse smelled faintly of stale coffee and cleaning solvent, the folding chairs arranged in tight rows facing the podium. Karen was already there, wearing a blazer like she was about to testify before Congress. Linda hovered by her side, clutching a folder and giving me the kind of smile you'd give a man on death row. Neighbors filed in, some with that gossipy anticipation in their eyes, others just curious. At exactly 7 p.m., Karen called the meeting to order, wrapped the podium for attention, and launched into a speech that could have doubled as an audition for daytime television. She described the incident in dramatic detail, how she'd been driving carefully through the neighborhood when my sudden and reckless reverse maneuver left her traumatized and her vehicle significantly damaged. She even threw in a line about nearly being struck herself, which made no physical sense but earned her a few concerned murmurs. Then came Linda's turn. She stood, voice quavering just enough to sound authentic, and confirmed Karen's account like they were reading from the same script. It all happened so fast, she said, but I clearly saw Michael back into her. I was shocked he didn't even apologize. The performance was almost impressive if you ignored the fact that she'd been standing behind a hedge that night with no direct line of sight to my driveway. Karen wasn't done. She turned to the uniformed police representative, a community liaison officer who looked mildly uncomfortable at being dragged into HOA politics. She pressed him with questions about reckless driving and endangering residents, clearly fishing for sound bites she could quote later. To his credit, he stayed neutral, reminding the room that fault hadn't been determined and that the case was still under insurance review. That didn't stop Karen from pivoting to her real goal. Given the seriousness of this matter, she announced, I move that Michael Hansen be removed from the beautification committee immediately to preserve the integrity of our community standards. That was my cue to shift in my chair, but not to speak. Not yet. Let her pile it on. She called for a show of hands, and a few went up, but others hesitated, eyes flicking toward me. I could feel the weight of the moment building, the way it does just before a storm breaks. Karen thought this was her climax. She didn't realize it was only the setup for mine. By the time she wrapped up, she'd painted herself into a perfect little corner, a public record of her accusations, a room full of witnesses to her claims, the overreach to make what I had in my possession feel like a hammer about to drop. I sat back, kept my expression neutral, and waited for her to demand, inevitably, that I respond. Karen didn't make me wait long. As soon as she'd tallied the half-hearted votes and declared there was clear support for action, she turned toward me with that smug, tight-lipped smile she reserves for moments she thinks she's about to win. Michael, she said, her voice honeyed but brittle, I think it's only fair you address the community directly. Maybe, if you're willing to take responsibility here and now, we can all move forward. I let a beat of silence hang in the air, scanning the room. The neighbors who'd raised their hands looked anywhere but at me. Others seemed suddenly fascinated by their phones. I set my laptop on the table in front of me and spoke evenly without raising my voice. I'd be happy to address the community, but I think it's best if we stick to facts, not interpretations." Karen's smile wavered just enough to give me a little rush of satisfaction. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small HDMI cable I'd tucked there earlier. "With your permission," I said, glancing toward the board treasurer instead of her, "I'd like to use the projector." The treasurer hesitated, then nodded. Karen started to object, but I was already on my feet, connecting the cable. The projector screen lit up with my desktop, and I opened a folder labeled simply Driveway. The first video clip rolled, time-stamped, high definition from the garage soffit cam. My sedan sat motionless in the driveway, engine off, brake lights dark. Karen's SUV approached slowly, paused as if aligning, then backed straight into my bumper with a solid jolt. The sound of the impact filled the room, followed by the sight of her climbing out, looking around and making a phone call. I let the clip play twice, the second time zooming in on her face as she dialed. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Karen's face had gone tight, lips pressed so thin they nearly disappeared. That's out of context," she started, but I wasn't finished. The second clip played, the mailbox cam from 2 nights later. Same SUV, creeping to a stop at the edge of my driveway. Karen leaning forward, taking photos, her mouth moving. The audio was faint, but audible enough for the words, "If we can show it got worse," to be clear to anyone listening. By the time the third clip rolled, her on foot, crouching at my bumper in the dark, the room was silent except for the hum of the projector fan. The timestamp matched the night she'd submitted updated damage photos to her insurance. I paused the video and turned back to the room. The car hasn't moved since the night before the accident. These cameras run 24/7. I have redundant backups, cloud archives, and copies stored off-site. If anyone wants the raw files, I'm happy to provide them to the police and the insurance companies. The liaison officer cleared his throat. "Mr. Hansen, I'd like you to forward those to me today. This will be part of an active investigation." He didn't look at Karen when he said it, but everyone else did. Karen tried to recover, muttering something about privacy violations and tampering, but the energy in the room had shifted. The neighbors weren't avoiding my eyes anymore. They were avoiding hers. I closed my laptop, coiled the cable, and slipped it back into my bag without another word. The meeting ended faster than any I'd ever attended. Karen skipped her usual end-of-session chit-chat, retreating to the corner with Linda in tow. I walked out into the cool night air, the murmur of whispered conversations trailing behind me, knowing the fallout was just beginning. By the next morning, the temperature in the neighborhood had shifted so sharply it was almost funny. People who'd been giving me sideways glances a week ago were suddenly waving from across the street. A couple of neighbors I barely knew stopped me while I was walking the dog, both eager to let me know they'd always suspected Karen was overstepping. That's the thing about public humiliation. Once the tide turns, nobody wants to be seen clinging to the sinking ship. But Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. By Friday, she'd already fired off an email blast to the entire HOA mailing list claiming that my secret surveillance violated community privacy guidelines. She hinted that I'd been filming other residents without consent, and that my tactics were dangerous for the neighborhood's sense of trust. It was classic Karen, when caught red-handed, make the issue about something else entirely. I didn't respond directly. Instead, I forwarded her email to my attorney, along with every section of the HOA bylaws that explicitly permitted security cameras on private property. I also included the state's legal code confirming the legality of recording in public-facing areas without consent. My attorney drafted a firm but surgical letter back to the HOA board. Not only was my surveillance legal, but any attempt to sanction me for it would constitute retaliation and therefore open the HOA to litigation. I CC'd the police liaison, my insurance adjuster, and, just for fun, the accident reconstruction specialist who'd examined both cars. That same afternoon, I got a call from the insurance investigator assigned to my claim. "Mr. Hansen," he said, "after reviewing your footage, the witness statements, and the physical evidence, we're formally denying Ms. Fletcher's claim and opening a counterclaim on your behalf. Given what we've seen, her insurer may drop her coverage entirely." His tone carried that quiet satisfaction of someone who enjoys watching karma work in real time. The police moved faster than I expected. The liaison officer requested my unedited footage and asked me to come down for a formal statement. When I arrived, he introduced me to a detective from the fraud division. They'd already pulled phone records showing that the night Karen was caught on camera inspecting my bumper was the same night she'd sent new damage photos to her insurer. The timestamps matched almost to the minute. Combined with her public accusations at the HOA meeting, they had enough to open a criminal case for filing a false police report, attempted insurance fraud, and conspiracy, with Linda as a potential co-defendant. Word spread fast. By Monday, there were whispers that several HOA board members were privately urging Karen to resign for the good of the community. She refused, of course. At the next regular meeting, she tried to resume business as usual, calling for votes on landscaping budgets and pool maintenance schedules as if nothing had happened. But the tension was thick. A few people openly questioned her authority, while others avoided her altogether. I stayed quiet, letting the process work. My goal wasn't just to beat her, it was to make sure the truth was undeniable, carved into the HOA's public record so there could be no rewriting of history later. I filed formal complaints, attached the video evidence, and requested that all meeting minutes accurately reflect both her accusations and the proof that contradicted them. It was slow, procedural, and utterly suffocating for someone like Karen, who thrived on control and perception. By the end of the week, the police notified me they were moving forward with charges. They didn't say when they'd serve the warrant, but I had a feeling it would be sooner rather than later. And when that day came, I wanted to make sure the entire neighborhood saw exactly who had been running their HOA and what kind of person she really was. The morning it finally happened was one of those crisp Texas Saturdays where the sun is sharp. The air carries a hint of cedar, and the whole neighborhood seems to be outside trimming hedges or walking their dogs. I was in my driveway, giving the hood of my sedan a slow polish, when a pair of black and white cruisers rolled down Maple Oaks Lane. They didn't have their sirens on, but the sight of them was enough to make conversation stall mid-sentence and hedge clippers pause mid-air. The cruisers stopped in front of Karen's house. Two uniformed officers stepped out, one holding a folded sheaf of papers. Karen herself appeared in the doorway a moment later, still in her robe, coffee mug in hand. From where I stood, I couldn't hear the exchange, but I didn't need to. Her body language told the whole story. She went rigid, then began shaking her head, gesturing toward the officers with the kind of frantic motions only the truly cornered make. The officers were patient, professional, but firm. Within minutes, Karen was stepping onto her porch, now dressed in a rushed combination of slacks and a floral blouse. A third car pulled up, a plain sedan with a detective from the fraud division. That's when I saw the moment she realized this wasn't a warning or a discussion. This was an arrest. Linda, ever the loyal lieutenant, emerged from her own house just in time to see Karen being read her rights. She moved toward them, starting to shout something about mistakes and misunderstandings. But one of the officers turned to her and said something quiet. Linda froze, her face draining of color. Later, I'd hear she'd been offered a deal to cooperate in exchange for a lighter charge. By now, a small crowd had gathered at the edge of the sidewalk. Neighbors whispered in low tones, some recording on their phones. I didn't take out mine. I didn't need to. This moment was already burned into my memory. The same woman who had paraded herself as the righteous guardian of community standards was now being escorted to the back of a police car, hands cuffed behind her back. Over the next month, the fallout unfolded like clockwork. The HOA board convened an emergency session without her and voted unanimously to remove her from the presidency. The treasurer announced his resignation 2 days later, citing irreconcilable differences in leadership ethics. A new interim board was formed, one that seemed far less interested in weaponizing bylaws for personal vendettas. In court, the evidence was damning. The videos, the phone records, the insurance timestamps, even fragments of overheard conversations Linda had corroborated. Karen took a plea deal, 3 years probation, a hefty fine, full restitution for my car repairs, and mandatory resignation from all HOA positions. She was also barred from holding any officer role in any HOA within the county for a decade. The official letter of apology from the HOA arrived in my mailbox 2 weeks later. It was short, formal, and clearly drafted by a lawyer, but it was still satisfying to read the words false accusations and unwarranted actions in print. I framed it and hung it in my garage, just above the workbench. Life in Maple Oaks settled into something resembling normalcy. The petty complaints dried up, the passive-aggressive letters stopped, and for the first time in months, I could park my car without wondering if someone was plotting its destruction. I upgraded my camera system anyway. Newer lenses, better night vision, even a discreet unit tucked inside the mailbox. Call it professional paranoia, call it habit. On the garage door, I bolted a small aluminum sign, custom engraved, "Smile, Karen." You're always on camera. Most people think it's just a joke. The ones who know the story smile for a different reason. And every so often, when a new neighbor moves in and hears a half-whispered version of what happened, I catch them glancing at me with a mix of curiosity and respect. They'll figure it out eventually. In this neighborhood, the cameras don't just watch, they remember.